Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, a show for people who are obsessed with all things marketing. I'm your host, Veronica Romney, certified master marketer, international keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and the author of a new book called Identity Marketing. Each week, I interview rainmakers from brands big and small to pull back the curtain on what's actually working in marketing today. We dig into real life wins and losses and their very real consequences, and get into spicy discussions of marketing controversies and opposing philosophies. This is the real marketing thought leadership you've been looking for in your ears on demand. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. Shelley, welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast.
Oh my God, Veronica, I'm so happy to hear you here. I feel like
know.
we're soul sisters. This is a long time coming.
Listen, we were fangirling before we officially turned on live, so this is going to be fun.
We sure were.
And I want to give a massive shout out and thanks to Tamsin Webster, who put us in connection, who is also one of the smartest, loveliest humans possible. So thank you, her, to introducing me to you. And the reason she introduced us together is because you worked at Harley Davidson. That's not what you do now, which we'll get into, but you were the chief marketing officer at freaking Harley Davidson. Now, let me tell you my relationship with Harley so we can go. I am not a hog. I don't identify as a hog. However, when I was writing my book, Identity Marketing, I'm 37 now. It transported me back to when I was like 17, 18 years old as an undergrad in school. And I remember my consumer behavior professor teaching us about how families will personally commission Harley Davidson caskets so that their loved ones can be buried as a hog, because now their identity is, I'm not a Harley Davidson consumer, 1567. I am a hog. And in my opening keynote, I do this big bit, which is like the story of Billy Stanley, how him and his son spent 5 years building a plexiglass coffin so that he could taxidermy himself on top of the bike. And that's what was lowered into the ground, took 3 extra grave plots, all of this crazy stuff. And so I make this whole big, argument that like, stop pitch slapping your way to a purchase. Invite your people to become something, because that's when you have loyalty that literally lasts a lifetime. Now, that's my obsession with Harley Davidson, the brand. Now, when I reached out to them, they said politely they're not in the business of death, which I totally respect. like you can't go to their website.
Which is a touchy subject with motorcycling. Okay. Let's be honest. Yes. I understand why they responded that way.
Yes, and I totally get it too. But it's not like you can go to the website and like order a coffin. I get it. I totally understand. But you were in it and you were the marketer in it for so many years. And so transport me back into those days, those weeks, those months, those years where you were the guardian of this legacy brand. I mean, Harley's been around since 1920.
Oh yeah. Harley is probably now about 115 years old.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah. That's not an exact number. I'm terrible at math, but it is. Let me say that when I was there, Harley's about probably 120 years old now. Because when I was there, one of the big celebrations we had was their 110th anniversary.
There you go. Yeah.
And then shortly after I left, they were celebrating their 115th. And it's been 8 years since I walked away. So yes, a very, very, very long time. I always say it really was such an epic chapter of my life, because as somebody who was in advertising and marketing for 26 years,
long time,
including my time at Harley. So 6.5 years of that was at Harley. There is no greater honor, in my opinion, than stewarding an iconic global brand that people love so much. They tattoo it on their bodies and they create caskets, just like what you were speaking about. So it really is such an incredible, honor. And sometimes I still have pinch me moments, even though I walked away, and we'll talk about that chapter later.
Yeah.
The other thing, it was such a privilege, right? And it was a privilege for the reasons that you're getting at, because to have created a brand that is such an emotional experience. It was never about the thing, right?
Yes.
The thing being the motorcycle. Yes. It was about the experience. It was about freedom. It was about how you feel, not only yourself on those open roads with the wind in your hair and like not caged in. Because quite literally, they called cars cages.
Mm.
Cars were cages because, it's the thing, it's the thing that keeps you sort of compressed inside, which I think is a really beautiful metaphor
Yeah, it is.
for how to live. And so you were living uncaged, and living freedom is obviously a huge part of the brand and the emotional experience. And so you're buying into the emotion. And that's why for so long, people were willing to spend so much money on Harley,
Mhm.
because Harley was never the best product on the market. And
Mhm.
I'm sure you talk about this a lot, and I
Mhm.
cannot wait to read your book, by the way.
Thank you.
I will be shouting it out from the
Oh.
hilltops on all of my platforms as well, guaranteed. But I know I'm entirely sure you talk about this. I've heard you talk about this on Instagram, where it wasn't the best product on the market, but it was the idea that it grabbed the heart and soul of the consumer. The consumers wanted to be a part. You said HOG, which stands for Harley Owners Group,
Mhm.
right? Just to break that down for anybody who doesn't know the
Mhm.
motorcycling world, doesn't know the Harley world. That is this community that was really created by the customers for the customers. Harley Davidson as the motor company, as the mothership, if you will, Harley kind of helped gently steer that community to make it a bit more formalized and cohesive and put some other perks. But ultimately, it was consumers volunteering to create Harley Owners Group events and to be a part of, stewarding this brand and what it looked like on a local, grassroots, very
Mm.
human level, which says everything about the brand. And I think, my opinion is it's kind of lost its way a little bit. I think Harley tried to be a little heavy handed in what that started to look like, and maybe trying to steer it and control it a little bit much. I mean, it started very organically, and that was the beauty of it. And like you said, Harley doesn't sell caskets.
Mm-mm.
Consumers believe in
Mhm.
doing that because it's such a part
Mhm.
of their identity.
Mhm.
And so that freedom, that authenticity, that kind of fire, that rebel, all of those aspects of the brand are really what people identify with, because it's not a performance
Mm.
motorcycle. It's not the things, when you think about like going through the Alps in Europe, for example.
Mhm.
We did that on Harleys, and it was an absolutely epic experience. But a lot of people would say, yeah, but you know what? I would choose a BMW to do that because it's more sporty, and you can really lean into the curves a bit
Right.
more. It's a very different riding experience. But a Harley rider really wants that emotional experience. It is a different thing, and it's a different connection with your fellow Harley riders. So I think that to be a part of that, all the things that
Mhm.
you're touching on, is special. And it's a unique challenge as a marketer,
I was gonna
because you
say
have
this.
to really sort of tread lightly and
Yep.
hold loosely, right? You want to guide it, but you don't want to try to over engineer it, so to
I
speak.
was gonna bring this up because I'm curious about this. I've had the privilege of listening to a lot of great marketers talk about their guardianship, their parental oversight to a community. Sometimes when I hear marketers talk about communities, it's almost like hearing a parent talk about their kids.
Yeah.
like like teach them correct principles and they'll govern themselves. Will they? And always reminding them of their boundaries, but also letting them like grow up and play. And so it's really interesting sometimes these the things that I hear. My understanding when being a marketer and overseeing a devout, I don't want to use the word cult, but like a devout, loyal fan base community group, it is a sword that needs to be wielded very carefully. Whether it's
Mhm.
Taylor Swift Swifties, because the Swifties is another example where if she's not careful, she can use them and weaponize them, and they can like really hunt down an arch nemesis. And like, damn, the
Yeah.
Swifties are giving out death threats. Like, calm
Yeah.
down. like
Yeah.
I thought we were into friendship bracelets. What's happening, right?
Yeah.
And then same thing with the hogs. like this community is, I mean, they are so devout, and it's such a part of them that they like literally wear clothing to like showcase their religion, so to speak, their Harley Davidson religion. And um but how, when you were chief marketing officer, first of all, just organizationally, did community, was that under your jurisdiction, or was that its own department? Like, how did you integrate that with the other marketing and stuff that you guys were doing?
Yeah, it evolved a lot over
Okay.
time. So maybe
Okay.
let me just set the context a little
Please.
bit. And I want to be clear. I know you know this. I think it's important to say for anybody listening to this right now, so much has changed at
Okay.
Harley in the 8 years since I
Fair.
left. I am not privy to where they are now, how they're organized now, anything. So this isn't current
Mhm.
information.
When
I'm
you were there.
speaking from, yeah, my lived experience. I left at the end of 2016. So just for clarity, um, what was interesting is, so I went in under the chief marketing officer at the time. I was brought in. This is also, I think, interesting, and I'll get to answering your question.
Oh,
I was
totally.
brought in because I had no experience in automotive. I had no experience in power sports. I didn't even grow up in the world of like gas and oil, as people often call it.
Mhm.
And so, but I had incredible experience around the world working for iconic brands from McDonald's to Visa to Intel and all of these other categories. And in really creating these very aligned, very integrated global marketing organizations. And so that's what I was brought into Harley to help with. So,
Mm.
one, I was a fresh perspective
Totally.
because I hadn't drank the Kool-Aid. And two, I soon did drink some of the
Sure.
Kool-Aid, but I also added my own flavors and perspective because I wasn't bought into like all the sacred cows, so to speak, which was really helpful. And two, I was brought in because I really understood how
Mhm.
to build a cohesive global marketing organization. And so I think we called at the time when I started, I was like VP of integrated marketing and
Mhm.
planning. I was
Mhm.
really Harley was already a global
Totally.
organization, but the marketing organization wasn't truly global and integrated and aligned. It was kind of
Always
these
fascinates
fractional
me.
pieces, right?
Fascinates me.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So it gets to what you're saying. So the question you asked about where did community fall in all of this? It took us a while. Like, community absolutely was part of the marketing organization.
Okay.
And it evolved over time. We really had to figure out, we kind of had, I ran global marketing, and then we were a very matrixed organization. I
Okay.
think that's important to say. I don't know if they're still that way now. They were very matrixed organizations. So I had a leadership team of all of the marketing departments around the world. I think that my team at the time was 250
It's
people in marketing. I
crazy.
mean, Harley's a relatively small organization for having been in the Fortune 500, and or small, small organization, but small marketing. It's a small but mighty marketing organization that spends, or at least spent in the day, a lot less than you would
You
imagine.
would
And I
think.
think part of that is the power of the Harley brand and the community that you're describing, and just so much of what happens at a local level, so much of what happens with consumer advocacy in the Harley owners group,
Yeah.
and all of that. But community was absolutely part of how we thought about the brand, and frankly, so much a part of our marketing horsepower,
Mm.
because we weren't spending the kind of dollars that, I just said, McDonald's, Visa, Intel, all these other really, really big brands with massive budgets. We were probably spending a rounding error of what McDonald's was spending on marketing. And we were looking for the right kinds of partnerships and leaning into community and that consumer base. And so it really was something that we understood to be one of our secret weapons, like a secret sauce for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, certainly a competitive advantage, and
Yeah.
a budget booster. Like,
And it had to be a
it had
budget
to be.
booster because I
Yeah.
was blown away when I first went in. And I won't talk numbers, partially because one, it's not my story to
Of course.
tell. And two, I barely even remember the numbers this many years later. But I think it is really, I think one of the beauties of Harley, and I think about this all the time as I'm kind of building my own brand and business, and I have this bigger mission in the world now. I think about having this kind of outsized aura, of your brand. And I think I have it by virtue of who I am and how I show up in the world and my choice of orange and my passion
Mm,
for what I do. And people are like, wow, you must be doing all the things, like you must have run a gazillion-dollar business. And I'm like, oh God, if you only knew.
yeah.
If you only knew. But at the same time, I think it's such an incredible, it's very flattering. It's very, so I say thank you. And I think I learned it from Harley.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that I mean, I show up as me,
Mm-hmm.
but that authenticity, that courage, that rebel, all of that is so true to me. It's part of the reason I aligned with Harley. It's part of the reason I wanted to go there, that I said yes, that I learned how to ride a motorcycle, that I showed up at all of these motorcycle rallies around the world and, hung out with our Harley Owners Group members, because it's powerful.
Mm. Gosh, I get like goosebumps. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed.
I
Okay.
hope I'm answering. Was I
No, you
answering your
are. No, and
question?
I have
Okay.
more questions because I'm weird like that. So I have more questions. So like there's two trains of thoughts that I've come across thus far. It's like, I remember Bill, which is the head of marketing at Yeti, he says things like, we don't want to hijack our customer stories. And I'm like, okay, totally got it. And then I'm on a call having this interview with Levi Jeans, and they've been around for like
Oh
175
yeah.
years. And they literally have a historian on payroll in the marketing department. And a lot of their contemporary marketing pieces and advertising campaigns is actually sourced from the archives of real human beings, like using their pair of Levi's to like, tow a car and
Yeah.
crazy cool stories that they then give it marketing gloss and put it into an official marketing campaign. When I tell the story of Billy Stanley being buried in a plexiglass coffin, taxidermy style on his Harley, like, did those stories hit your desk? Did those stories come across your way? And then it was like, well, should we do something with this? Like, how much did you guys, because of the legacy of the brand, try to stay in the center of culture, in the center of these customer stories? How much did you try to leverage that internally?
A lot.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the way we were structured, so the structure doesn't matter. What matters is, before I got there, Harley decided to invest in carrying their legacy forward in the form of the Harley Davidson Museum.
Ooh, okay.
It is an unbelievable experience that
That's
still
cool.
exists in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So
That's
it
cool.
at, near Harley headquarters, or the original Harley headquarters. I think post COVID they
Sure.
repurposed or sold up that building. That doesn't matter. But the Harley Davidson Museum, I invite everyone to go experience that, from a marketing perspective, from a consumer perspective, just from an American history perspective, because it was even Harley's role in some of the vehicles in the war.
Mm.
Right. I mean, and it just sort of takes you forward, and the evolution of, Harley, from the days that it was like the little shack with the Harleys and the Davidsons, and, all the way to modern day. One of the things I was a part of, which was revealing or unveiling the Livewire, which was the first
Mm.
electric motorcycle at Harley, which became a commercial product after I left. But, you think about all that history, which is absolutely incredible. So we had the benefit of the Harley Davidson Museum, and in the creation of the Harley Davidson Museum, the most thoughtful, deep archives of stories were built
Mhm.
for the brand. And so
Mhm.
it's consumer stories, it's cultural stories, it was Harley's role in, things in culture evolving in the zeitgeist over many, many decades. And
Cool.
then you can start to see how the evolution of the motorcycles and the company and the Harley owners group and all the things were evolving. And so we had this incredible blessing of being able to tap into the archives and find historical stories that we might want to leverage. So when
So
we would be
cool.
working with agencies,
Yeah.
partners,
Yeah.
we might have an idea and then we go dive into the archives. And then we tried to be, as a marketing department when I was there, we tried to be very closely connected with our customer call centers.
Oh,
So as another way to understand not only where are their challenges, but more importantly, they're on the front line
yeah, they
talking to
are.
our consumers. So we have Harley Owners Group, on the ground. So literal boots on the ground. And we have customer call centers where there are live conversation happening hundreds and thousands of times a day. And what can we be learning from all of those places? So, some days it worked better than others, but we tried to set up those two-way
I love
streets
that.
for communication. Yeah. And I would highly recommend that
Yeah.
for anybody in the space, because man, your call center is on the front lines of the good, the bad, the ugly, and the good, rave about it, take it and run with it.
Love that.
The bad, learn from it.
I love, well, I sometimes I get frustrated when I hear marketing departments not playing nice with others because to me, like, that's such a missed opportunity. Like
Huge.
what you were saying, that there's so many different departments or sections or divisions of a business that are on the front lines that are just sitting on a mountain of gold
Yeah.
that like any advertiser would like love to like, harvest, and they just don't. And it
Yeah.
always makes me so sad because like, and then the burden befalls the marketing team to be like these creative geniuses when like the creativity is already like within a phone, a Slack message
Yeah.
away. So
Well, and what's interesting, I'll say two things, because I think you'll be interested in this. I mean, so there's that piece of it, which really speaks to the core consumers. I mean, for the longest time, it was the baby boomers who were the absolute bread and butter, and the touring motorcycles, and Harley looked a certain way, and the Harley customer, the Harley demographic looked a certain way and dressed a certain way, and Harley owners group had a certain vibe. Even there was a democracy because it was lawyers riding with plumbers, riding
totally.
with, all over, which is so incredibly cool. We don't see that often enough in the world.
Hmm.
And it became very interesting as we were trying to evolve Harley's appeal, because we couldn't continue to milk the baby boomers forever. And you might have been going here, so maybe I'm preempting a future question.
No, keep going.
We had to start thinking about, where is our growth coming from?
Oh boy.
So
No.
this was a
Hmm.
very significant part of our marketing challenge when I was there. It was like, okay, great. How do yes, we want to continue to serve the baby boomers, and, touring bikes are a huge part of our business. The United States is it is the single biggest part, market for the
Hmm.
company. And Harley's a global company, and the growth markets are outside of the US. And the growth audience, customer segments, are not the baby boomers. And so while we were, focused on that and really sort of mining history and all that, we were also getting very creative about, how do we take some of the inspiration from the archives, so to speak, and make them, and like translate them to pop culture. So they're appealing to young adults. Translate them in ways that inspire new products, that bring more women into
Oh
Harley, that
yeah.
bring more Latinos into Harley, that bring more
Yeah.
young adults into Harley. And so there was this cool kind of translation exercise that was happening as well, because we were pushed to modernize, to make ourselves culturally relevant to new groups that we'd never talked to. And of course, we had to have the products that would appeal to those groups as
Yeah.
well. So there was a lot of change and evolution in the years that I was there. It was absolutely a master class. steps in marketing. It was
In
cool.
so many ways. And then unfortunately you see the examples of like the Jaguars that in 2024 where they like decimated their history with a new campaign to be appealing to a new buyer
Yeah.
persona. And it's like, okay, I'm going to do a hard pivot here because I think sometimes I mean I certainly felt this way before I like jumped ship and did my own thing, but like as a young and coming marketing professional, it was very much the with every intention to like grow, keep getting promoted, position this and like amass, become the chief marketing officer of a huge brand. You did that. And then what often accompanies said achievement is like a realization of the goal that I thought I wanted maybe isn't exactly what I thought it was.
Hmm.
And you have since departed the traditional corporate route, and now you are a chief soul officer with every intention in helping people redefine what success really means from what they probably originally thought success was, especially in their
Yeah.
careers. You took a soulbatical, which I am so obsessed with that word. My husband he's a VP of sales at a software company that they've already crossed the 85 million threshold. He talks all the time. He's like, man, like once we hit these certain financial milestones and we get acquired or we go public or something crazy happens, I think I need a sabbatical. And then I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk to somebody who does Soulbatical. So I want to just, to the degree that you feel comfortable being as transparent as you want to be, like you reached the mountaintop and then you got
Hmm.
off. Take me there.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to unpack here, and I know we're not going to have time to go in depth through all of
Sure.
it. So I will say Soulbatical was not only the journey I took when I left Harley, and I'll explain why I left, what I was experiencing. It also became the book I wrote and put
Exactly.
out into the world. So little seed planting. If any little bit of my story resonates with you, you can get more of it in the book. The
Cool.
book's called Soulbatical, A Corporate Rebel's Guide to Finding Your Best Life. And okay, so let me tell you this. God, so much of what you just said, you set that up really beautifully. So
I try.
I, yeah, well, you do a phenomenal job. So what I realized is, 26 years serving all of these iconic global brands,
Huge.
loving it. It took me around the world. It opened me up to being a global citizen. It opened me up to really seeing brands from so many different perspectives and through the lens of so many different cultures and all the other stuff that we've already talked about. And yet I get to, so I'm doing all the checklist, right? It's like, okay, do all the things, big brands, bigger brands, climb the corporate ladder, do all the things. And it served me very,
Yeah.
very well. Following that very traditional societal checklist about what success, and I'm putting that in air quotes, looks like, served me unbelievably well. And when I got to Harley and the early days where I was like learning to ride the motorcycle, and I was coming off of a really turbulent divorce before I went to Harley.
I'm
So
sorry.
Harley was not only this absolutely incredible marketing opportunity, I was reclaiming my own mojo and badassery. 100%. It was this beautiful, like the
That's
universe
cool.
serves up what
That's
you need
cool.
in the moment.
Yeah.
And I was also like, I didn't have this at the time, but I have on my forearm tattooed authenticity. And it's a line from my book, Authenticity is the Truest Form of Rebellion. And I think I learned that from Harley, did not
Mm.
really understand it until about in my final year of Harley, I started having this like earth shattering, like soul shaking nightmare. And it's actually where my book starts. My book starts with me having this nightmare every single night, seeing the exact same thing. So I am losing sleep. I am tortured. I'm confused. I'm now drinking myself to
Yeah.
sleep. I'm trying to hold my shit together during the day. I'm trying to look like the
Yeah.
leader who has it all together and all the things. And as I moved through that, I sought therapy, I sought coaching, I sought help to try to make sense of it all. I realized this profound truth. The profound truth is that what I was seeing in the nightmare was actually a proxy for my soul. And my soul was malnourished and neglected
Depleted,
and
yeah.
longing for my attention. And I won't spoil the details of the nightmare, but suffice it to say, what I realized is that I, like so many people, had been living someone else's success script.
Oof. That
And it's
resonates.
not
Yeah.
to say that that doesn't serve you well.
Yeah.
It serves you well to a point.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be the point, and you're going to get the cosmic kick in the ass at some point.
Yeah.
And I got the cosmic kick in the ass that was really hard to make sense of because I was in the sexiest job in marketing. I was like, I pierced my nose and I was wearing leather jackets and skinny jeans
To
and
work.
boots in boardrooms to work, to present to our board of directors, to stand in front of thousands of our Harley dealers at these global conferences. I mean, absolutely, to ride motorcycles around the world. And how I could feel so empty and exhausted and alone and unfulfilled was terrifying.
Mm.
And so ultimately, through doing some work, through realizing I lived my dad's script, and side note, my father was a pretty well-known marketing executive and business executive. He went up through the ranks of many different companies that you would know, from like Speedy Alka-Seltzer, Miles Laboratories, like back in the day, through to Pillsbury. So he was very actively involved in Pillsbury Doughboy and Jolly Green Giant, on. And then ultimately went to kind of reinvent and become the CEO of Haagen-Dazs ice cream and do some of their super sexy advertising. So to say it was in my blood and it was the script I handed is it's very literally true. And I loved it. It was sexy. It served me well. But when I had to face my own truth, I realized that I had become disconnected in service of all of these iconic brands. I was left wondering, who is Shelley Paxton?
Who's your
when
brand?
you strip away, when you strip away the titles, the money, the travel, all of it, what's left? The brands, what's left? And I started thinking, what if Shelley Paxton is the most iconic brand I could ever represent?
Snaps, sister, snaps. Love that.
Yeah. And I'm saying this because, one, that was very literally the question I was asking.
Yeah.
And I say that in the book. And I'm putting this out there because I'm not saying you have to anybody asking themselves that question, I'm not saying the answer has to be, and now I'm going to start my own business and my name is on the marquee.
Right.
I'm saying, what are those deeper questions? Like, who is Shelley Paxton was more about, what are my values? What are my truths? What are my desires? What's in service of my well-being? And going down this path is what led me to realizing, when I left Harley, I didn't know how to explain this to anybody. I looked like the batshit crazy person who was leaving the sexiest job on the planet.
Yeah.
Even my family was not in support. And everybody was saying to me, wait a second. You should have another job before you leave a job. You should just stay at Harley and become president, or at the very least, just wait for them to lay you off and get a juicy severance package.
Yeah.
You should have a book deal lined up.
So many shoulds, damn it.
All the shoulds, all the shoulds. And I really had to rise above that and say, I don't know what life is. I was 46 when I left Harley, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to be a shell of a human being if I really don't do this work and really nourish my own soul in service of just understanding who am I and what does success look like for me? How would I define it? What's the currency? And so that's what set in motion me leaving from Harley. And I did it on my terms, and I did it with, I cried, I bawled my eyes out, but I did it with great respect and great admiration, and making sure I wasn't interested in burning bridges. I wasn't interested in going, F you, Harley. It wasn't about Harley.
It had nothing to do with Harley.
It had nothing to do with Harley. And so that was the beginning. 8 years ago was the beginning of my Soulbatical, which was at the time I thought meant leaving your job.
Mm-hmm.
And now I realize it's actually a way of leading. It's not about leaving, it's about leading. And it starts with ourselves and knowing ourselves and understanding how we want to define success. And then for ourselves, for our organizations, and for the world in general, I see this vision of all of us collectively redefining success in a way that celebrates our humanity, our well-being, and our soul. And it starts with us. And if I can be any little part of more leaders, like you said, at Levi's, at Yeti, at all of it, at Harley, at all of these incredible brands, being part of shifting culture so more of us can show up successful and not success empty, I feel like I will have made an impact in this world.
It's oh gosh, I have so many thoughts. First of all, you badass. Let's just start with some affirmation. Oh my gosh. But also it's just so I recently on my 15th wedding anniversary, which is last November, I decided to do something different outside of the box as far as a vacation goes. And so we went to this like nervous system regulation retreat.
Oh, you're speaking my language,
in
girl.
Mexico. And it wasn't, I didn't want like a yoga retreat because I'm not a yogi. I wanted something that was like science-based protocols and like legitimate cool stuff. And so I found this place that was a recommendation from my friend. And when we were there, to validate what you're saying, the collective group, first of all, it's over Thanksgiving. So here we are, there's a group of 17 of us over Thanksgiving. So we're skipping out on the traditional Thanksgiving, US Thanksgiving experience. And around the table, you have an executive from Meta. You have this badass woman. Actually, it was majority women. Let's also give credit. It was majority of women. There were 4 dudes, total 13 women. And all of these females were entrepreneurs, high executives, business leaders. And we were all there because high achieving, while wildly successful in achieving lots of cool stuff in our lives, we were completely dysregulated and needed to resuscitate our poor nervous systems at a minimum, let alone like answering those soul probing type of questions like, why am I here, what am I doing to myself, right? And so it is sad because I think sometimes the go-to solution is just to quit whatever it is that's sucking your soul. So like people quit entrepreneurship. I felt like 2024 was a reckoning year for online entrepreneurs, online personalities were like, F it. And they were like quitting. And then you also have these high level corporate executives who also feel like, when I get off the podcast interviewing a lot of them, they'll ask me when we're not recording, like, so how'd you do it? I'm like, oh, do you secretly want to get out of there? Like, I won't name names because I respect their privacy, but it's really interesting that I think regardless of which grass you're playing on, the go-to inclination is to like leave said grass and go find other pasture. Because the harder work, the more introspective work is to like stay on the existing pasture and be like, what the hell is really wrong?
And how can I be a part of the change?
Exactly.
How can
It's
I,
not
for
just
both
them.
myself
Yes. Yep.
and
Yep.
whatever, my team, the organization.
Exactly.
And it's hard.
It's super hard.
It's hard because, the whole tall poppy syndrome, like you're going to start to stand above and people are going to look at you. And I even say in my keynote, I'm like, people look at you like, well, what the hell does she think she's doing? Or what the hell does he think he's doing? And it's like, you're going to get the side eye. You're going to get the looks when you start to say no, when you start to,
Totally.
uphold your
Disrupting.
boundaries,
Yep.
when you start to make choices that feel aligned with you, that regulate your nervous system, all of that. And I believe that more of us stepping into this and upholding this, like we can be, I call it the ripples of impact. To me, that's the new ROI. Ripples of impact. Like we can be the change and start to tear down this, the cultures that are killing us. Look at our mental health crisis and burnout and all of it.
Especially, it's funny, especially for the marketers, the rainmakers, the sales organization or mission, messenger missions, what do I call them? Mission messengers. That's what I want to say. Like just these people that are in positions to generate revenue, like they're just churning and burning and churning and burning. It's so sad. And I laugh because, companies have unlimited PTO that nobody takes. They have wellness days that nobody honors. Like it's ridiculous. It's absolute, but and unfortunately, it's also top to bottom. We see some of the most egregious boundary breaking happening at the very tippity top, and so it
Yeah.
feels psychologically unsafe for you in the power dynamic to then question the top of the top. But I totally agree with you because like we're all burned out, we're all fried, we're all this, we're all that. So why aren't we all collectively just like unifying ourselves? Like enough. Look at the Europeans? They take like 2 months off in the
Yeah.
summer.
I know. I always point to Australia and New Zealand and like the Nordic countries. I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what? There are examples. I
Gosh.
have a friend who runs the Sabbatical Project, which would be really an interesting conversation for you as well. And I'm happy to make an
Sabbatical project.
introduction.
Mhm.
And it really is. He also teaches at Harvard Business School, and his book comes out, I think, this month actually.
Cool.
Anyway, but it's about like how can we he's done tons of research on the positive impact both individually and from an organizational standpoint of having sabbatical policies
Like
in
true
place.
time off. Yeah.
Absolutely. True time off. And what
Mm.
did people do and how was it structured and what did they learn? And what ultimately was not only the benefit to that leader, but the benefit to the organization. So he's doing some really groundbreaking,
That's cool.
thought leadership and research in that space that excites me because I think Soulbatical is kind of adjacent to that. I mean, Soulbatical really is about, to me, it's a new way of being. It's a new way of leading. I'm not necessarily fighting the fight of sabbatical policies in companies. I am absolutely fighting the fight of how do we look at creating cultures, first for ourselves and then in the organizations that we're
Mm-hmm.
in that, are much more aligned with our well-being and our
100.
humanity and our soul, right?
Preach, sister. I'm
Yeah.
here. I'll be a ripple. I'll be a ripple
You
changer.
are a ripple. You
I'll
are
do
a
it. Give
ripple.
me a sticker. I'll
Yeah.
be a ripple. I love that. I
I
love that
love it.
identity play. Thank you. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll be a ripple. I
Yeah,
love that.
exactly.
Shelley, I literally could talk to you for ebbs. I think we are very kindred spirits for sure. I can tell. This is going to be like the beginning of a blossoming friendship, which is really fun.
Sure is. Thank
We
you.
do this cool thing on the podcast because I've asked you all my probing questions other than your bra size, but like almost and so it's only really fair if I think it's fun where the last question is actually for the guests to ask me whatever it is that they want and put me particularly in the hot seat or just whatever your curiosity wants to ask.
Oh my gosh, I love
No
this.
pressure.
I am curious. So I want to
Yeah,
stick on this theme of success. So, especially with you on the entrepreneurial side, doing what you do,
totally.
I'm curious, how do you define success for yourself? Like, what is your currency when you think at the end of the day,
Mhm.
how do you feel successful?
Mhm. Well, and it's funny because that first of all, it's a phenomenal question. Second of all, I feel like I'm in the middle of a rebrand of myself in some capacity. And so therefore I feel like success is changing. So like with this book coming out, people are like, "Oh, are you going to go for like the New York, Times bestseller, all these bestsellers lists?" And I'm like, I could give a flying F about bestsellers lists. They're like, "Oh, but that's like is that not how you define the success behind a book?" I'm like, maybe it is conventionally for others. I don't care at
Mm,
all. So that one
I went through this too,
I went,
sister. I
yes.
love this.
I have rebelled against that. It's not a matter, it's not a quantity that I'm chasing with this book. It's just like I'm so tired of people harassing and pitch slapping their way into buying or into getting people to buy from them, which only sets up buyer's remorse and like people aren't going to buy from you again. So kiss that relationship goodbye. But that's where I feel like the marketing lane has been saturated since COVID. And so I'm just like so fed up and I'm upset by it. And so like it's not a matter of how many books can I push, it's just how many people can hear this alternatives like way of marketing that feels just so much better. So I think that to me, the other way that I've always defined success outside of like number of humans that I wish to seek to serve. Yes, of course, I understand that. But I don't even have those goals. I don't have like, I'm going to influence 1 million people, or I'm going to do like, I've actually never had those entrepreneurial goals that I think a lot of companies will put on their website. I've always had these like internal goals. Like I have very specific people on my team that I'm like, I really, really, really want to be successful enough to pay Casey this much a year, or to have her in this position, or to have this 1099 person no longer have to be 1099, and they no longer have to work with shitty clients.
Yeah.
And so like my success has always been very people oriented, both personally and professionally. Like I think about very specific team members that I want to be successful enough so that they can be successful in their homes. And then I also think my kids are, 8 and 10. And so I never want to not be available to them. However, I don't want them to not see mommy chase her goals and dreams too.
Yeah, of course.
So that one's a really fun line where like, my boys are getting old enough that I might be able to take them on my keynote trips and they can see mommy do what she does, But yes, I feel like I've been consistent in this regard. I've always defined success in the people closest to me that I can love on harder with more success.
Oh, it's beautiful. You know what? It's so interesting. Everything you just said. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being vulnerable in that answer. I literally feel warm from head to toe. And you just said in such a gorgeous way what I do. My love language is words.
Same.
Literally,
Words
it
of
is.
affirmation.
So exactly. And so I wrote, this is in my keynote too, I wrote a definition for successful, because having been on the success empty side, I'm like, we've got to redefine successful with an Full
Yeah.
at the end.
I like that.
And the definition I wrote is this. I want to read it to you because I feel like you just articulated it so beautifully in your own way. I wrote, it's courageously defining success on your own terms and in a way that feels fulfilling and energizing from the inside out. It's having an impact in the world and not on your well-being.
Yes. Again, you must be a marketer. That's really good. That was really good.
And you said such a beautiful thing. And I wrestled with all the New York Times stuff and all of that as well. And it's like, you know what? And what I know 5 years into it, my book is going to turn 5 years old this month. And what I know is that my book finds its people in the exact moment they need it. And that's all I need to know. And I didn't know that at the beginning. So I'm sharing that little pearl of wisdom with you.
I receive it. I embrace that. That's very affirming to me. And whether you subscribe to the universe, God, the invisible hand, like I totally karma, I believe in that so deeply that like, yes, that in the right time, right person, right place, right time in so many ways. That's true for romantic relationships. That's true for like all relationships, whether professional or otherwise. So I totally agree. Shelley, how do people like fangirl over you? Where can they find you? Where can, one of the things, again, she just said that her love language is words of affirmation. So if you've loved this conversation, DM her and tell her why you loved this conversation, because that would mean something to her. So where can they DM you words of affirmation?
Thank you. My 2 platforms and play spaces in the socials are LinkedIn, Shelley Paxton, and Instagram at the Shelley Paxton are the 2 ways to find me. ShelleyPaxton.com is my website. So just keep it easy. And you can find my book anywhere where you buy your books. And like you, I am making speaking a bigger and bigger part of my business because I really want to stand on more stages and evangelize this message and help organizations and leaders to move forward in a way to create these ripples to really create a healthier, definition and culture of success going forward. So you can hire me too.
I've seen clips of you on stage. Girl, you can work a stage. So
thank you.
Let's do this. More stages for powerhouses.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Shelley, for being on today's Rainmaker podcast. Thanks for listening today. If you've loved what you heard, make sure to rate the show, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us get the Rainmaker podcast in front of more passionate marketers just like you. And if you're ready to transform your marketing from buy this to be this, pick up my new identity marketing book available on my website at veronicaromney.com. Until next time, my friends, keep making it rain.